It is a very warm welcome back to Matchbook's NFL podcast. We were off last week. I'm to blame for that one. Drew Dinsick is back on board. Fabian Sommer as well. Guys, great to have you back on board. Drew, you were out in the islands for Thanksgiving. You look refreshed, mate. I like it.
Oh, I feeling refreshed and back. Readjusted. I'm not no longer on island time. But yeah, it was a nice Thanksgiving holiday for those of our listeners who in the U.S. Happy belated Thanksgiving to you. Hopefully, you all had winning weeks, and we move into December. It's December.
December the
Crazy.
1st. Fabian Sommer also on board this week. Rob is away with a family commitment this week. Fabian, the Bucks -3 was one of our favorite. Look, we didn't have a podcast last week, but obviously the betting community is still a relatively small one. I think more or less everyone was on the Bucks. Obviously, Drew got the best in the number, as he does late on Sunday nights, -2.5. The rest of us suckers had -3 though. God bless playoff Lenny in November. He's a beautiful man. Beautiful thing.
And while that play happened, I was basically saying, "Man, go down."
Yeah.
So you don't give
We
the
can get a
Bills
push,
another opportunity. Yeah. But
Yeah.
for everyone who had Bucks -3, that was an epic run.
Oh man, that kickoff return, I think that aged a few of us as well when he was going on the left side. I thought, you for real? But here, that's the NFL season. Let's be honest about it, guys. Week 13, as we look at it, it isn't the strongest of slates. You know what? Whatever about Thanksgiving, if this is a Sunday that you were going to maybe take your better half out or whatever else, this might be the Sunday to do it. However, there's bound to be a few bets here. And the first game we want to look at, we're going to talk about this AFC East clash. The AFC East, all of a sudden, is a proper divisional race. And the betting we have it as at matchbook.com currently. The Patriots here 2.26. The Buffalo Bills at 1.73. The main handicap line was 3 yesterday. I will chat in a second about why it's moved to 2.5. And its odds against 2.04. 43.5 is the total. Suma, why did we go from 3 to 2.5? Because you and a few amigos moved it this way, didn't you?
Yeah, we might have something to do with it.
Yeah.
Slack community is always strong on those early
Yeah.
in the week. But yeah, I like the Pats at +3. I think right now you showed that there is still a juicy +3 out there at Matchbook, when I remember right. Yeah. So
Yep.
to be honest, this is a very intriguing matchup because we have two teams that are completely playoff ready, but have played a very laughable schedule, to say the least, over the course of the season. However, I think that when we put everything together, and even when we adjust all those efficiency metrics that we deal with and what we see on Sundays on the film, etc., when we put everything together, I still think that we cannot make a 3-point difference between the Bills and the Pats right now. And what I also believe is that we maybe gotta give the Patriots a little bit more credit in terms of how they have
Yep.
progressed throughout the season, because you have a rookie quarterback playing his first ever NFL season, who was drafted as the 5th quarterback overall, where no one could imagine that he would play such a great season, and he's now the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
The offensive line was incredibly injured for the Pats early in the season. They are now back to their starting formation. And Bill Belichick has also figured out his defense. So the Bills basically had everything in place when week 1 rolled in, but the Pats really needed several weeks to dive into the season, to figure some things out on defense, figure some things out on offense. And when we put everything together, the sum of all parts, I really don't think that we can make any big discrepancy between both teams right now. So I'm not quite getting to +3. I think this is a very tough quest for Josh Allen and the Bills offense, because the Patriots' pass defense is playing at an absurdly higher level right now. They will make things very difficult for Josh Allen, who has shown some inconsistencies this season. His offensive line is also not the best in the league, so Belichick will probably cook something up front. And then on the other side, the Bills just lost their best defensive player in Tre'Davious White. It might not matter a lot because we have like 20 miles per hour of wind in the forecast. That's something to monitor. But even if we just ignore the weather for a moment, I think that overall it's really hard to make a case why the Bills should be 3 points better than the Patriots right now. I think both teams are in the same tier. The Pats are on an absolute heater right now. Great coaching staff. And yeah, +3 for the Pats. I couldn't really quite get to that number.
Yeah, Joe, and just on the Bills, we talked about maybe 4 weeks ago. They were the outright favorite in our Super Bowl book. That's obviously changed. It is hard enough to get a read on this team again, though, and obviously they did a good performance in New Orleans last weekend. But where are you rating them now in this one? Is Sommer right? You know, that 3 is kind of hard to get to.
Well, one of the funny things about I was pretty heavy on the Bills in New Orleans. A lot of that was injury related and kind of fading New Orleans, but there was a kind of a quiet confidence you had backing this Buffalo Bills team in a dome. I mean, I'll be perfectly frank. Like, you know, Josh Allen is playing more crisp football when the conditions are quiescent. When the things get a little tougher, you know, he could, because his accuracy has dipped a hair this year relative to last year, when, you know, when the wind is up, when things aren't quite right, you know, we've seen some pretty suspect performances from him. And if you know, I agree with, in general, with Suma's take, you know, depending on how you want to evaluate the sample of data that we have from this season, if you want to just take everything equally weighted for the whole season, or if you want to, you know, time decay the older stuff, especially considering we know Bill Belichick sort of treats the first 4 weeks of the season as an extended preseason anyway. This is something we must have talked about for like 15 years. Like, he's really not putting his best stuff on tape the first 4 weeks of the season. And if you just look at week 5 through today, the Patriots and Mac Jones, you know, they're elite. Like, they're playing at an absolutely elite level. You know, the Patriots are on the same tier as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ahead of every other team in the NFL, including the likes of the Cardinals and the Packers, and it's impressive to see what they've done, considering that this is a team that really, you know, did not have many standout players as we entered their season. In fact, the name you knew on this defense, Stephon Gilmore, is not even on the roster anymore. And you know, all of these guys are getting, you know, just the defensive player of the year kind of candidate play out of Matthew Judon, out of JC Jackson. And, you know, again, a lot of the narrative around this team was back to Patriots this year because they're getting all these guys back from their COVID, you know, year off. Those guys haven't even mattered. Like, it's been all of the rookies and the free agent, you know, pickups that they made that have really kind of found roles in the system and are playing above their level. And so as I look at this game, and specifically this, you know, this matchup in this contest, I didn't make a play, and I actually, I was leaning Patriots. I dilly-dallied. I missed the best of the number, so I'm off it. But I think actually, ultimately, I have a Bills stake on the AFC East from the preseason. I added more to my Bills stake after they lost week 1 to the Steelers. And this would have been the right time to try to level things out if I was worried that the Patriots were going to steal the AFC East. And I didn't. So I guess ultimately, you know, I didn't really find this to be a compelling EV price to back the Patriots at +3. I was waiting for a 3.5. I think it needs to be a little bit higher here. The fact that this is a primetime game for a rookie quarterback in Mac Jones is a little bit concerning. You know, this is going to be a huge spot. He's really only played one of these to this point of the season. It was week 4 against the Patriots, and that was obviously, you know, one of the more ballyhooed games of the entire season. And so it is a little concerning if he's going to come out and give you a clean game against the Bills defense, while having played no one so far this year, is, at least by the metrics, a stouter unit than what we saw last year. You know, ultimately, this is going to be an information, you know, learning type of a game for me. I'll probably play something at halftime depending on how it's going. But you know, the Bills haven't played very many. They have not played difficult competition this year over the balance of their schedule. They just haven't. They have had the one game against the Chiefs. This is maybe their second kind of meaningful big test. They have another game against the Buccaneers, I believe, next week, and then another game against the Patriots. Those 4 are really the only true tests we're going to see of this Bills team all season. And they may have some tricks up their sleeve. They may have some stuff we haven't seen. Stephon Diggs still is one of the more dynamic players in the NFL. If I'm making a case for the Bills here, I'm really trying to identify, is the Patriots defense perhaps a bit overrated? They have played some pretty weak competition, particularly the last couple of weeks. I think ultimately this probably comes down to who has the ball last, or in game, who can kind of manage their turnovers. Not expecting a ton of big plays here, and should be a very competitive game.
I think it's interesting what you say about the Patriots defense, because I wonder too, because we haven't had an elite defense in this league for a while yet, and obviously the metrics are kind of moving that defense does not matter, that maybe they're just getting a bit too much hype. Sumi, you wanted to jump back in there, but
Yeah, just something to add. So we all look at different metrics every week, and something like Football Outsiders DVOA is a great metric, but it's just a toolbox or just a tool to use, something that helps us describing performances. And if we take a look at some stuff like DVOA, which adjusts efficiency on a down-to-down basis by opposing schedule, I mean, even over the course of the season and not waiting for recent performances, the Pats have a better offense than the Bills, even though no one would basically look at their offenses on paper and say that has to be possible. So the Pats are a really good football team, and and also something to add. So going into the season, the only weakness that the Bills defense had was their cornerback depth behind Tre'Davious White, and this gets really tested right now and going into the playoffs. Even if the wind doesn't play a major role on Monday night, you have Taron Johnson, you have I think his game is Dante Jackson, who filled in for Tre'Davious White last week. Guys like these playing now on the outside, and Mac Jones has been one of the sharpest quarterbacks out there. So I don't really think that there is a major gap even between the talent level of both offenses right now.
All right, yeah. Do you have anything to add there? Sorry about.
Yeah, we haven't. I will add one note of caution to Patriots backers. I think, I agree with Suma's handicap. I'm not saying that this was, there's some fatal flaw here. We haven't seen Mac Jones play in the wind yet in his career. And he does have a ball that has a little bit of a trajectory on it. It's not as much of a zip. I'm not trying to disparage his arm, but it's not the most high velocity pass out there in the NFL. And there is some potential that the wind affects his intermediate and deep ball, and maybe the Patriots know that. Maybe coming into this, they have a game plan that relies more heavily on the short pass. But it's possible that the loss of White and really just the weakness of the secondary in general for the Bills doesn't really matter much in this game. Like, I'm thinking back to like last year's Bills Ravens playoff game in the wind right at night. And the Ravens really weren't threatening with the pass much at all downfield. It was all short stuff. The Bills were extremely capable of adjusting on the fly and really, kind of squelching the Ravens offense in that game. And I wouldn't be totally shocked to see something similar here. And I think that's a lot of the understeam you've seen here. And some of it's weather, but more of it, I think a lot of people are identifying potential matchups here that favor defenses.
I'll tell you this much about Mac Jones, though. You asked the other four teams that drafted a quarterback in last year's draft in the first round before them: Jags, Jets. Who else have we got? The San Francisco 49ers. Who we all thought, some of us didn't think that they were going to take Mac Jones. And then you have the Chicago Bears. So let's be honest, they'd probably all take him. He looks a hell of a player. Patriots +3, Suma, because I backed the +3.5 last night on your advice in the Slack channel. So yeah, we got to take it here. We'd be just just bad people if we didn't take it here. So Pats +3 at 1.86. We got a better price last night, but you know what? 1.86, nothing to be sniffed at all. Next game, want to talk about the Washington football team on a bit of a heater currently. Back 3 wins, 3 pretty good wins against the Bucks, Panthers, and Monday night against the Seahawks. They're 2.22 shot on the road in Las Vegas against the Raiders, who are 1.75 on the money line. The football team getting a 2.5 point start at 1.99, and you can back the Raiders there 1.95 on that. And 49.5 is the total, and it's shaded towards the under. Dinsick, you're kind of surprised there. There's a small bit of resistance on this total. You think the way to go is over rather than under?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't have a strong lean either way side here, but I agree with your sentiment. Washington is playing very, very strong football right now. Taylor Heineke is performing at a level that is kind of more towards the top of his range compared to what we saw through the middle of the season, where he was making mistakes in the red zone and taking points off of the board. And really, a ton of the credit, I think, goes to the offensive line for the Washington football team, which is fully at full strength right now. Really winning the battle in the trenches, really being able to help dictate drives and drive states for the Washington football team. And their Monday Night Football performance against Seattle was unimpressive ultimately in terms of points scored. They get a tough, hard-fought win. But there were even points left on the field in that game for Washington. Obviously, the red zone trips that came up empty, and particularly that last one, stands out in my mind. And this Raiders team, however, is a little imbalanced defensively. They look good on paper defensively, at least particularly compared to expectation. However, a lot of that is based on pass rush and really just the one contributions of Max Crosby, who has been outstanding this season. And I think Washington can neutralize his impact on this game, give Taylor Heineke time to make some plays down the field. Terry McLaurin has a beautiful matchup here against a weak Raiders secondary. And in general, Washington, I think, can go score for score with the Raiders team that also should find a very comfortable situation here. Washington's pass rush was expected to be a distinguishing factor for this defense this season. It has not materialized. The fact that they held Russell Wilson and the Seahawks to such a low total last week, I thought was born more out of the decision making of Pete Carroll in that offense than it was and also the injury to Russell Wilson than it was the way Washington was playing defensively, because Washington can give up some big plays in the passing game, with regularity. You see opportunities to really attack them down the field, and now that you have a Raiders team that's and Derek Carr in particular that's playing with confidence, he's playing among the best in the NFL right now in terms of his just raw quarterback numbers, on top of the fact that the advanced numbers support he is at a top 5 level, and I think he's going to be able to pick apart this Washington defense down the field. This is a decent setup for a back and forth scoring affair by my numbers. I'm seeing touchdowns, not field goals ultimately, and 49.5 is low. I think the fair here is on the other side of 51, so I played the over.
Yeah, again, plus money 2.0 or even money at matchbook.com currently. So I don't think you have a bet so far in the week. Obviously, we're recording this on Wednesday. It's pretty early. But if you were to pick a side, I think you're leaning with the football team.
Yeah, at the current price, it would be Washington or nothing for me. Don't know whether we could potentially see a +3 later in the week. I doubt it at this point. But to me, I don't really see a big difference between these two teams right now. The Raiders are on a downward path for the last 4 weeks, and even though they had an impressive upset at Dallas on Thanksgiving, I mean, let's be honest, they lost Darren Waller at some point before halftime, okay, but the Cowboys were without CeeDee Lamb, without Amari Cooper, and the Raiders scored 13 important points where they got DPIs on third down incompletions. On one touchdown, they got saved with 2 DPIs on 2 separate third down incompletions. Another field goal DPI on third down incompletion, and their field goal in overtime, that final play, DPI on an incompletion. So it was a wild game. Dallas had 14 penalties for 166 yards. It was a very crazy game. The Raiders closely won. I don't really upgrade them for that performance at all. So over the past 4 weeks, they have not really looked any good to me. And it's hard for me to make a case why the Raiders should be a step or a decent step ahead of Washington. For comparison's sake, DWA has them exactly 2 ranks together. I think Washington is 2% worse than the Raiders right now. And also, we've been talking so much about the Raiders defense, about their strong pass rush. But even though they still have a good edge rush, their pass defense has been basically horrendous for the majority of the season after week 4. So overall on the season in weighted DVOA, they are 26th in defense in general. They are 29th in EPA per dropback since week 4 and 32nd dead last in EPA per dropback since their bye week. So this passing defense has really been declining. And Washington, like Drew has said, they're getting healthier. Their pass protection is outstanding. I think this is one of the biggest storylines of the entire season. The Washington football team's offensive line, especially their pass protection. Sam Cosmi is on IR now, but we didn't really see any difference on Monday Night Football against the Seahawks. So the one thing that the Raiders do best, pass rush, gets a little bit negated by very good offensive line play from Washington. Then you got Curtis Samuel is back, Logan Thomas is back. They're getting, I think, better roles this week, especially Curtis Samuel. I think he was on a decent snap count last Monday. So I don't really see a clear path for the Raiders defense to have much success against that Washington offense. I think that plays a little bit into Drew's over, even though I don't have a strong opinion there. If Darren Waller is not going to play, that's even more of an advantage for Washington. Washington's pass defense has been very poor to start the season. They have been getting a little bit better. Landon Collins is not playing the deep alignment anymore. He's playing much closer to the box. I think that helped. The cornerbacks are a little bit healthier. They are still getting solid interior pressure. So overall, I think this is a Washington team that's getting a little bit better, a Raiders team that's still on a downward spiral. And overall, I don't really think we can make a major case why the Raiders should be favored by 2.5 points. This could be a coin flip game, and then I would rather side with Washington. Like I said, I don't know whether that's going to 3. If Darren Waller is out, I doubt we will see any kind of path towards the 3. But even at 2.5, I would rather take Washington than the Raiders.
Yeah, Sommer, you're lagging a small bit. So what I'm going to ask you to do just for a couple of minutes is to log out of here and open a new tab and join us again in a second if that's okay. But and I'll start with Drew for the next game. But anyway, Drew, Washington and Vegas over 59.5 is the play at 2.0.
Let's do 49.5.
Yeah, 49.5. So what did I say? 48.5?
I think you said 59.
Yeah, 49.5.
Although, I wouldn't mind the price on 59.5.
Yeah.
But, I think this could be a high scoring.
Yeah. Bit of an exotic total. Well, anyway, 49.5 is even money at 2.0 matchbook.com. So happy enough with that. And at 59.5, you might be getting 3-1, maybe 3 or 4 to 1. So yeah. So when Suma comes back, we'll talk about this game first of all. The Ravens Steelers, Drew. I think Suma's got a maybe stronger opinion on this. But let's take a look at the betting as we have it currently at matchbook.com. You can back Baltimore Ravens here at 1.5 on the money line. The Pittsburgh Steelers at 2.8, and the main point spread as we have it at the moment. Steelers getting a 4-point start, 2.0, and the Ravens are -4 at 1.93. 44 is the total. Mr. Sommer is rejoining us currently at the moment as well. My producer will just about bring him in. Sommer, I just called out the betting there on the Ravens and Steelers. You like Baltimore in this one, bud? Yeah, they're -4 at the moment. You played at a better number. Do you play -3.5?
No, I also got -4.
4. Okay, cool.
Am I still lagging right now, or am I good?
I think you're good. Drive on for a second now. We'll see how we go.
Okay. So yesterday after Mike Tomlin announced that Pat Frymuth is in the concussion protocol and Robert Spillane is likely out, that number saw an uptick. It was 3.5. It got an uptick towards 4. That's when I jumped in. I like the Ravens in this matchup before, but now we could potentially see Pat Frymuth sitting because of a concussion. He has been a top 3 receiving option for the Steelers this season, getting better every week. And TJ Watt has tested positive for COVID. And I think this season there was not a single player who was able to play in the same week where he tested positive. I can't remember any player. Someone might prove me wrong, but I can't really remember any player. So I have him. I'm leaning toward TJ Watt being out, and the Ravens looked horrendous on Sunday Night Football, even though they still won by 6 points. Somehow I don't know how they did it. I had Browns +3.5. It was a tough scene at the end. But however, Lamar looked piss poor, 4 interceptions. And this might be a little bit of I would say, buy low opportunity on the Ravens team that I have not really downgraded for 2 recent performances. 2 weeks ago at Chicago, they were with Lamar Jackson. Last week, they had a stinker against a much better Browns defense. They had 2 great edge rushers and a speedy linebacker in JOK behind that. And this week, they are facing a completely different matchup. The Steelers' defense over the course of the season now ranks, let me check, 29th in weighted DVOA. The mighty Steelers defense, something that we would have never expected. Until last week, they had a pretty drastic split in pass defense without TJ Watt on the field. So with TJ Watt on the field, their pass defense has been significantly better. But last week, even though he was back in the formation, it didn't really matter at all. So that defense is really on a downward path over the course of the season. And what's also really crazy about them, and that also plays to the strength of the Ravens, since that second half against Seattle, the Steelers cannot stop the run anymore. Since that Seattle game, they rank, let me check, 31st in yards per rush, 30th in rush EPA per play, and 21st in rushing success rate. They really struggled to defend the run. Justin Fields and the Bears, they average 0.09 EPA per play. Justin Herbert rushed for like 80, 90 yards against them. So they don't have a great matchup against that Ravens rushing offense with Lamar Jackson. And without TJ Watt, they're also are really, really underwhelming against the pass. So I don't really see, even with TJ Watt, I think that the Ravens will have a solid matchup where they can establish the run and get into shorter passing downs all game long. But without TJ Watt, this is a pretty bad defense on paper against a Baltimore offense that still, well, I have still rated at a very high level. So I think that the Ravens should be able to move the ball on them. And on the other side, I mean, that Steelers offense, even though they got progressively a little bit better over the course of the season with better offensive line play, better scheming, more motion, a little bit more play action, but they're still down to Smith-Schuster, they're on their left guard, Cameron Dotson. Big Ben really needs one heck of a game or one heck of a day to get anything going. You can put Marlon Humphrey on the outside on Chase Claypool, but if you don't have Pat Fryermuth, that basically leaves Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson in the passing game. The Ravens are pretty solid against the run all season long. They likely get Calais Campbell back. They likely get Brandon Williams back. They played the Browns pretty close at the line of scrimmage to make Baker Mayfield beat them deep. I would expect kind of a same defensive approach where they play closer to the line of scrimmage, shut down the Steelers' rushing attack, and then force Big Ben to air it out. And to be honest, I would side with the Ravens defense in this one. So overall, and I get why the number opened, I would say, low at 3.5. If we take a look at closing spreads over the past couple of weeks, the linear difference between both teams was around 4 to 4.5 points. But I think you have to adjust a little bit for the matchup. You have to adjust for TJ Watt and Pat Fryermuth potentially being out. And that's why I think this is an incredible bounce back spot for the Ravens after 2 very underwhelming performances. And yeah, I like them to win by more than 4 points in this one.
Yeah, -4, 1.93. Drew, what of the Steelers? Is this has to be the ultimate buy low spot here for this team, right? After such a comprehensive loss in Cincinnati last week. Because look, the record still isn't that bad. If you look in the greater scheme of things in the AFC, the way it's shaping up, but it's hard to get away from that, isn't it? That performance last week. It's been coming for a while.
I mean, Sully, let's not forget, both of these teams have played the Bengals this year and gotten their brains beat in. There was there was nothing to write home positively about the Ravens' performance when they played the Bengals. So I'm a little I'm not, and also like both of those games got away from the the away team, I guess, or from these teams. Both of them got away in the same sense, right? Like it was just a couple of breaks and then bang, 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 and then the game was completely out of reach, and there was really no hope of coming back. And so I think it's fair to kind of set that result aside as you try to make a fair price for this game here. Where I'm sort of surprised is, and as Suma mentioned, the look ahead here was 3. It's been it's been pushed out now to 4, 4.5, 5 some places. So basically, we're saying that the Ravens deserve the upgrade here. My guess is that's entirely based on the absence of TJ Watt. And it's amazing to me that TJ Watt is worth as many points as he is to the market, because I can't think of any other reason why the Ravens would be upgraded after what you saw from them last week. They get the cover, but this is a team, I'm not sure they deserve the cover, on top of the fact that if you go back before that, they, they get the closing cover against the Bears, but it was an ugly win. They lose outright to the Dolphins. They squeak out a win in overtime against the Vikings, don't cover. And then before their bye week, they lost in ugly fashion to the Bengals. So you have to go back to basically week 6 when they handled the Chargers convincingly to really find a Ravens performance that tells you this team is anywhere close to elite. And, that's, I think, what you're hinting that with this line, as it's starting to tickle towards a touchdown on the road against a difficult divisional foe. So I am hopeful that Suma wins his bet here. I'm hopeful that the Ravens cover for more, not just because I like Suma, and not just because I, in general want to see the Ravens succeed. I like Lamar Jackson. He's probably my favorite player in the NFL. But I'm looking at this Ravens schedule after this Steelers game. They go at Browns, they got Packers, at Bengals, and Rams. So that 4-game stretch right there is going to be as difficult as any team is going to face all season. And I am very curious to see how the market prices the Ravens in those 4 games, considering how lackluster they've been to this point. Right now, the market is power ranking them between like 6th and 8th in the NFL, depending on where how you calculate that. And that feels way too high for a team that is just not showing us the quality that was expected, particularly at the quarterback position. Lamar has not looked great over the last handful of weeks, and he's going to have to completely turn the corner and really show us something special down the stretch here if the Ravens are going to hold on to this 1 seed that they currently occupy in the AFC playoff picture.
Yeah, look, I'll be honest, very similar to game 1. I'm in that Slack chat, and I know you'll wish us the very best of luck here, Drew. I'm going to take the Ravens -4. And as a lot of people in that Slack chat, I think you're in it as well. It's 1.93. So, yeah, you can wish us luck on that one. I respect the case, though. But I think Suma's going to run roughshod over us anyway on this one later on the show. Potentially, sorry. Ravens -4, 1.93.
Hey, you know what? The Steelers are frauds. I completely admit that. The Steelers' offense is not worth their current rating at this point in the season. So, hopefully for future betting value, we get a truly dominant Ravens performance like we saw when they went toe to toe with the Chargers, and that inflates their price a little bit, so we can come against them the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and speaking of the Chargers, let's move on. They take on the Bengals. Chargers, they're a weird team. I swear to God, they have so much talent offensively. They cannot stick it together. They're 2.48 shot on the money line. The Bengals are 1.61. Chargers getting 3 here, 2.06, 1.89. You can back the Bengals. 50.5 is the total. This is a game that I looked at, and I don't know if we have a specific bet, but I think it's an interesting one in terms of both sides and how they're coming into this one. Obviously, Cincinnati trending very hot right now. We just touched on it there, their big win over Steelers. But Drew, talk to me about the Chargers, because I don't know, man. They're hard to read.
Yeah, this one was a surprising market. It's going to be a very informative game for a couple reasons. Obviously, this matters a ton in the playoff picture. These two teams are currently occupying wild card spots. Loser will fall out of the playoff picture for the time being. So this is a big high leverage game for both of these teams. Neither team, I don't believe, has completely lost sight of winning their division. And realistically, you have 2 young quarterbacks that were drafted in the same class in Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, who are the real deal. These guys look for real. They can play quarterback in the NFL. They're going to be around for a long time. I think both, just in general, the fact that these two teams have found their quarterbacks of the future is exciting. And this is potentially, maybe the first head-to-head of what will be a beautiful rivalry between these two very solid young players. Your points about the Chargers are very, very correct. They have not strung 2 wins together going back to week 5. They put together, a lackluster performance in primetime, beating the Steelers, turn right around, go up to Denver and absolutely laid an egg. The fact that their defense gave up 28 points to that Denver Broncos offense when the Broncos were missing both, all of their tackles and really, was not. I'm not sure exactly how that happened, to be honest with you, but the issues with the defense for the Chargers really stand out, particularly in the run game. They, for whatever reason, cannot figure out how to finally tune their run fits, and it must be driving Brandon Staley absolutely up the wall because he's a defensive-minded guy. And then on the flip side, a lot of what we saw from them earlier this season, where they were being very aggressive on fourth down, that was paying dividends because Justin Herbert was doing some amazing things on fourth downs. Now the play calling hasn't been quite as solid. The aggressiveness hasn't paid off, and we're starting to see sort of the tail end of variance in a lot of these results, which is, I think, kind of driving a lot of the perception of this team. It's been difficult to get behind the Chargers from a betting standpoint all season, and I think this is probably they're performing among the poorest of teams against the spread. If I had to guess, I don't have those numbers in front of me. But they continually, are not living up to expectations. And this is a tough spot that they find themselves in now. They had to go from the West Coast to Denver, play at altitude, and now they go from the West Coast to Cincinnati and play early. Not a great spot for them. Not interested in getting involved here really with the Chargers. But I do think that laying the price with the Bengals is a very dicey prospect. This Bengals team has shown us now, every time they've come up with a huge win this season, they have turned around the next week and either eked out an ugly win or just completely given it the ghost. And I would expect that, some of that is because it's a young team. Some of that's because the coaching staff doesn't have a really strong identity. There's not a lot of veteran leadership in that locker room in general. And I worry that, you're coming off of a huge your second win against the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. You've only lost the one game in division to the Cleveland Browns so far this season. And, you may be feeling a little good about yourself as you look down your schedule and you see Niners, Broncos, and then a Ravens game coming up next 3 weeks. So potential letdown spot for the Bengals, enough to keep me off this game entirely.
All right, Suma, our producer, has taken away your camera. I do like your avatar though. It looks pretty fresh. I like that professional photography. Talk to me about the Chargers, Suma, because there was times there last week. I watched that Denver game quite closely when you almost felt that the Denver defensive staff knew what the plays were. It was just so predictable. Like Joe Lombardi, he just does not seem to be calling a good game offensively right now.
I don't really get it at all. Exactly what you were saying. So the Chargers are basically rolling out the Saints Drew Brees offense like almost every week.
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
There are so many short passes in the 0 to 9 yards range and only so few in the intermediate and in the deep range. On deep passes, 20 yards, 20 plus air yards down the field, Justin Herbert is one of the most prolific passers in the league this year. I think he has the highest passing rate on deep passes this season, but they only have like the 23rd most attempts down the field. So that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you don't have that typical speed star. I get that, but Mike Williams has been a phenomenal deep threat early in the season. And why you don't keep coming back to that, I don't understand it. Another thing is that they don't really attack the middle of the field. So the intermediate area, like 10 to 19 yards down the field, they just don't attack that. They didn't attack that at all against the Broncos. And this is really something where I question the offensive coordinator, even though overall efficiency numbers look pretty good for the Chargers. But every time you watch them since that Ravens game, you get the feeling that there's just something missing with their offense. Yeah. And now another
Taysom
problem.
Hill.
And
they're missing Taysom Hill. They need Taysom Hill. That's what they
need. And another thing that was pretty obvious last week was that Matt Filer not playing was a huge issue against the Broncos. They had Stenu Calamity, or whoever he spelled, sorry for that. I think Calamity. And he played at left guard, and the left side of the offensive line was pretty good for the Chargers all season long. But now without Matt Filer, who has like a 90 rush blocking grade from PFF and a mid-60s pass blocking grade, without him, that offensive line consistently collapsed against the Broncos. If Matt Filer is in, that's a huge bonus for the Chargers this week, because that offensive line, if they are bad at 3 positions, that's pretty bad. I mean, 2 positions, Justin Herbert can work around that, but 3 positions is pretty bad. But I understand that people don't get to 3 or even 3.5. I mean, at the current market price, it's Chargers or nothing for me, because however you spin it, I cannot get to 3.5 for the Chargers in this matchup. I still believe that the Bengals are not a really good team. They have a few great performances, but then you have games like where they lose against the Jets and Mike White and get absolutely smoked by the Browns. So they're pretty inconsistent. Their season-long metrics are not really overwhelming. But my one concern with the Chargers here is that, like Drew has said, they have the worst rushing defense in the entire league. And over the past 4 to 5 weeks, they also have a bottom 5 dropback defense. And their defense faces the highest rate of opposing second and shorts. So every time you get a first down against the Chargers, you have a pretty high probability of getting into a second and short. And that's one problem with their run defense. They cannot stop the run to save their lives. The Bengals, in close game states, they have a pretty balanced attack with a pretty balanced pass-run split, and they are pretty good at running the ball early on early downs with Joe Mixon. So I don't really see a lot of paths for the Chargers defense to get many stops here. I mean, you want to get the Bengals into 3rd and long, but the Chargers are not achieving that against any offense so far this season. So that's my biggest concern with the Chargers this week. Aside from that, I mean, it's a huge bounce back spot. That line is probably a lot of a crazy recency bias. The Chargers got smoked by the Broncos. The Bengals had one heck of a game against the fraud Steelers, like Drew has called them. Asante Samuel had his 2nd concussion, might be back this week, might not be back. That's also another injury. So Matt Filer and Asante Samuel, 2 pretty significant injuries for the Chargers that you have to monitor. But overall, I think on paper, this is a great bounce back spot for the Chargers and their offense against a defense that is not from the Fangio, Wink Martindale, Bill Belichick caliber, where Justin Herbert struggled tremendously. I think he should have more success against that Bengals defense that plays a wide range of different coverages and don't have a very strong pass rush. But I would take a look at Matt Filer, Asante Samuel, but there are also a few concerns with the Chargers defense.
Yeah, look, I think we spent a bit of time in this game, and I don't think we're going to get to a bet, but this could be one of those intelligence gatherings. Sit down and watch it and see what you can kind of glean from it, because we just think that the line is spot on in that sense. All right, let's do for a quick recap of what we have here. We've only got 3 bets from those 4 games, but there's more to come later on in the show here in the Any Other Bets and Best Bet section. We've got the Patriots +3 at 1.86. Over 49.5 in Washington versus Vegas at 2.0, and the Ravens -4 at 1.93. For a special offer for NFL podcast listeners on the Matchbook Betting Podcast, use bonus code NFL20, bet 20 and get a £20 or dollars or euro free bet. Use the bonus code NFL20 when signing up at matchbook.com. For that, full terms and conditions can be found at matchbook.com/promo/NFL20. Drew Dinsick, normally in this spot, this Any Other Bet section, we come to you and Rob generally, but Rob is away this week. So I'm giving you an extra one this week.
Oh,
I guarantee you, Rob is going to back one of these anyway. So first one, Vikings -7 at 1.99. Ordinarily, we would say we don't lay this kind of number on the road, but when your team goes to Detroit and they're laying 7, you just got to be backing it. And the Vikings, they surely should have enough here to cover this.
I hope so. Vikings are a tough team, man. They're a tough team to handicap, a tough team to back. But by all accounts, this is still a top half of the league team in any way you want to measure it, particularly on offense, particularly the quarterback play, particularly the wide receiver strength. And all of that plays directly into the weakness of the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions struggle with the pass defense. And in reality, this market, we saw when it was in Minnesota, it opened up around the same price. It was like 8-ish points. I got bet out to 11. And in reality, I didn't disagree at all that was the correct directional movement. I think Rob might have even bet that, actually, now that I think about it.
Minus 9.5.
Yeah. But either way, that was I thought the right side, and the Vikings played down to the Lions in that spot. And the Lions were still hungry, and they were a little healthier, and they were a little friskier. It was a hard-fought win for the Vikings. In reality, as you saw at the end of that game, the Vikings could have got whatever they needed whenever they needed it against them. And if they had played more aggressively, they could have won that game with margin. And I think that's what we see here in this spot. Vikings cannot afford to come in here and mess around with a Lions team that they are so far superior to. I think you get a pretty aggressive approach here offensively because of the potential absence of Dalvin Cook. We've talked about how, there are certain running backs who affect coaching decision making because they're so talented, and that it ends up being a minus EV proposition ultimately. And Dalvin Cook and Mike Zimmer, that's one of those marriages. And you take him out of the picture, and he feels like, okay, well, we can't run on first and second down as often now, so we're going to throw it a little more. I think that has the potential to unlock this offense to a degree. Vikings defensively were horrific last week, and I think in general they are still missing a number of pieces, but we are seeing some of the most preposterously bad quarterback play from Jared Goff so far this season, and it is trending down. I don't think that turns around anytime soon. I think this is a beautiful get right spot for the Vikings defense. Vikings win something, we'll say 38-3.
Love that, 35-point win. Dan Campbell taking over the play calling last week was one of the biggest shit shows I've ever seen. Some of the stuff, third and long, draw play, just draw play. No trust in the quarterback. Anyway, okay, next game, divisional matchup, AFC West. Generally speaking, Drew, in a very tight division like this, that if a team is getting double digits, like the Broncos are getting here, plus 10 in Kansas City at 1.91, we would always say, take the points, right?
Yeah, of course, especially because you have a defense with the Denver Broncos that is strong in the secondary, and where, you'll remember the two games that we had with the Chiefs going into their bye week were against the Raiders and the Cowboys, two teams that cannot effectively run the cover two that has been so outstanding in terms of frustrating Pat Mahomes this season. Who can run that and who does run that and who is excellent at that particular scheme? The Denver Broncos. And so I think the likelihood that all of the issues with the Chiefs offense are fixed coming out of the bye are low likelihood. And this is going to be a defensive game back and forth. I know that there's, if there's a Drew Lock appearance, then I'm going to probably just crumple up and burn my ticket here. But as long as Teddy Bridgewater gives us a full, 4 quarters here, I think this is a field position type of game, field goals, not touchdowns. And realistically, if you're going to give me 10 points in that spot, I'm going to take it. In general, the Broncos and Vic Fangio have played very effectively against the Chiefs as they've gone head to head against Andy Reid over the years. So this should be a good, competitive contest. It's in prime time. I know it's in Arrowhead. I know Chiefs haven't played especially well at home this year for whatever reason. Chiefs haven't played especially well in prime time this year, except for that Raiders game. So in general, I think Broncos give us an honest effort here. They're still playing for something pretty clearly, as you saw with the effort they gave you last week against the Chargers. This is going to be a pretty fun, good game. And I think having the points in pocket is going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, wild card spots on the line definitely in the coming weeks. Last one in this section. So Eagles, Jets under 45.5. I know you got a better number here early on in the week, but it's currently 1.92. And I suppose, Joe, a lot of this is obviously when we look at this Eagles offense, they threw an absolute banana last week. They did nothing last week in New York as well. But they do run the ball. There's a lot of clock goes off there, doesn't there? I mean, like when you're looking at that, you want to be on the unders when they're just burning clock and it's run.
Absolutely. That entirely on top of the fact that their defensive line against this pathetic Jets offensive line is a match made in heaven when you have Zach Wilson performing at the level that he is. My only fear realistically about this under is that the Eagles end up with some short fields and some touchdowns, a couple extra, maybe a defensive score. That could put this under pressure. But otherwise, I don't know why this isn't just going to run it back. Because think about last week's market. You had very similar strength team in between the Jets and the Giants. I mean, if you're going to tell me that there's a huge difference between those, I'm not seeing it. Particularly, Jets defense may be a little worse, but not so much worse that it's worthy of 4-point upgrade to the total. So Zach Wilson performing at a well below replacement level at quarterback this season, and the Eagles quarterback question mark is still up in the air. We don't know if it's going to be Hurts or Gardner Minshew, but either way, I think you're going to get a relatively conservative game plan here from the Eagles, and they're going to rely on the matchup that they have. This is a pretty good, actually even matchup in my opinion of their offensive line against a relatively stout Jets run defense. So I don't see either team really lighting up the scoreboard here, and this one is my favorite total of the week.
All right, yeah. We look back at Zach Wilson last week, and obviously, it's very early in the season. He's had a couple of injury issues, but some of the stuff, even the intermediate throws, the short throws, the flat out to the flat, he's just not getting it done. Suma, I felt like I haven't talked to you in a while, buddy. Of all those three bets, so we got the Vikings -7, Broncos +10, Eagles, Jets under 45.5. You were to play one of those right now, which would it be?
That's really tough because they all sound pretty good. I would.
Drew sells them well, doesn't he? He's the best salesman. He is the best salesman out there.
Yeah, for sure he is. Yes. I would probably take the Vikings out of those three. I think for all the reasons that Drew has mentioned, completely valid. I mean, the Vikings still have a backup-ish defensive line. I think Devin Tomlinson should be back from his COVID absence, but they still have like 2 or 3, let's say, backup positions at the D-line. The Lions want to run the ball. They will run the ball. They will run the ball until they cannot anymore. And by the time, there's a pretty good chance that the Vikings and their quarterback Kirk Cousins have marched into a lead. So that sounds pretty good to me.
All right. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Suma, stick with you, mate, for your best bet. I think we covered it already. Your two selections, the Ravens and the Pats. Would you like the Ravens as your best bet?
Yeah, I take the Ravens out of those two. I think the Ravens have a pretty good matchup against the Steelers, and there's also some decent upside if Pat Fryermuth and TJ Watt will be ruled out, or should they be ruled out. I think if they are in the end ruled out, I wouldn't be surprised if that number takes a little bit more towards 6-ish.
All right. Drew Dinsick, your best bet. You're laying 3 on the road for the 49ers in Seattle. Tell me, is this as much a kind of a vote of confidence for his 49ers team, or is it a kind of a detraction for the Seahawks unit?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
This is it's been a roller coaster ride for the Niners this year. I have not been riding the roller coaster in the positive. But the data is what it is. Over the last several weeks, they are performing extremely well. And amazingly, Jimmy Garoppolo, he is delivering. His EPA per play leading the NFL since week 5 is surprising. And a ton of that I think comes down to the skill position players finding their roles for this Niners offense. I know Deebo Samuel missing could hurt, but they have, he's getting some chemistry finally with Brandon Ayuk. George Kittle is a nightmare matchup for the Seahawks, always has been. And I think in general, the Niners, even on the road in a messy, nasty looking game in Seattle, I think ought to be higher, more respect ought to be paid to this -3. Very quietly, Nick Bosa is building a case for Defensive Player of the Year that I think should be paid attention to. He is compiling sacks finally after a slow start coming off his ACL injury, and he is generating a ton of pressure. Russell Wilson looked exceptionally uncomfortable in that game against the Washington football team. I think Nick Bosa is going to be in his face a lot of this contest. And realistically, there's the handicap that the Seahawks offense comes into in every single contest because of the decision making of Pete Carroll is getting to the point of absurdity. And if the Niners defense continues to trend upwards, which they continues to play at the level that they have the last handful of weeks, that could see them shutting out the Seahawks here, or at least keeping them to a paltry 10-13 type of point score here. We know that Pete Carroll's not going to go for it on fourth down. We know that Pete Carroll's going to waste early downs running the football into a stout run defense. I think that all sets up well for the Niners to really continue their trend here. I mean, amazingly, the Niners probably can't catch the Cardinals now for the NFC West. That looks like that ship has sailed, particularly since they lost the 2 head-to-heads there. But this Niners team, I feel more confident that they're going to be in the playoff mix than I would for the Rams. More confident that they're in the playoff mix than any of the teams below them that are struggling right now for a wild card. They're starting to get healthier. They're playing, they're continuing to improve, much like the Patriots are on the AFC side of things. So this team is one to watch is in the mix realistically in the NFC playoff picture. And in fact, I'm still a Tampa Bay guy through and through, that they're going to win the NFC again. But I think you have to pay attention to both Green Bay and San Francisco if you're going to look past Tampa Bay in the NFC. The rest of the contenders, I see all fatal flaws that are going to keep them from winning multiple playoff games.
So just clarify that for me before we wrap up. Nick Bosa, Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, you officially got off the Myles Garrett.
No. I'm playing defense. I'm playing
Okay.
defense on my. That was my biggest preseason bet by a long shot, and he's the market leader correctly because he's winning every statistical category across the board when it comes to pass defense. I'm constantly kind of head on a swivel. Who's coming up the board? Who could threaten him? And right now it's Nick Bosa. That scares me the most.
All right. A lot of fun, guys, as ever. Week 13 in the books. Like we said, it's not the most appetizing slate of games, but I think there's some good betting angles there anyway to be done with. My thanks to Drew Dinsick. Sommer, good to see your face again, bud. Yeah, looking very fresh. Like to see that. Yeah. We'll be back again next next Wednesday. Rob will be back on board as well. Don't forget insights.matchbook.com for a full recap of these bets and from all of our podcasts. And like I said, we'll be back next Wednesday. Best of luck with your Week 13 bets.